Hi there. So, you are arguing again about the dishes in the kitchen. You're fighting with your partner about the plates in the kitchen, unwashed. Whose turn? Who's going to do it? Or the fact that your partner is late again, or that text message that he or she did not respond to in a timely manner or quickly enough, or whose turn it is to go and pick kids from school. All issues, these are all reasons for conflicts and fights and arguments in our daily life. But here's what's actually happening. You're not fighting about any of those things that I just mentioned. The dishes are just an entry point. The surface content, the school run, the text message, these are just surface issues, what we call the surface content. They are entry points into conflicts. The thing you can point to, these are things that you can see or point at. But beneath that surface content, and this is what I really want to get you to understand, beneath that surface content, there's a deeper conversation that is actually happening. And you need to listen to that more clearly. One about connection and safety, and whether you actually matter to the other person. A conversation about power and control and whose needs actually count. A conversation about closeness and distance, and whether this relationship is actually solid or fragile. And until you understand what you're really fighting about, you'll have you'll keep having the same arguments but in different forms, over and over and over again. I'm Rahul from the Huddle Institute of Psychology, Philosophy, and Spirituality. And this is episode 2 of our third season. So, welcome. And today we are going to go beneath this surface content and try to understand why do we actually fight? What are the real reasons we actually get into conflicts? And I really request each one of you to listen to this episode very, very carefully. I'm almost begging here because this has come from a lot of personal experiences and a lot of research. Understanding this episode can make a real difference. I believe understanding this episode can make a real difference in your everyday life. So I humbly request your full, rapt attention to what we are going to cover in this episode for ultimately your own benefit. So, let me ask you something straight up front. Have you ever had the same fight multiple times with someone, just with different details? The details keeps changing, but really the fight is the same. The content changes. One week it's about money, the next time it's about time, the next time it's about whose family to visit during holiday, right? But the feeling underneath is kind of identical, the same frustrations, the same sense of not being heard, the same defensiveness or shutdown that you experience, the same explosions that you encounter. That's because you're not fighting about the content, my friends. You're not fighting about these surface things, although you might think you are. You're fighting about the pattern, the system. That is what I really want to bring to your awareness in this episode. Most of us approach conflict as if it's some kind of problem solving exercise. It's something to fix. If we could just resolve this specific issue, everything would be fine. Right? That's what we believe. If she would be this way, if he would be that way, they would be happily ever after. So we focus on solutions. Who should do what? When? How? These are the things that we are naturally inclined to think about. But here's what research consistently shows. The research tells us again and again that the content of the argument rarely predicts whether a couple stays together or breaks up. It's not the content of the argument. What predicts relationship success is how people fight, the process, not the content. And even more fundamentally, what's beneath the process is the question the conflict is trying to answer. Let me repeat that. Even more fundamentally, what's beneath the process is the question the conflict is trying to answer. Every recurring conflict is asking one of four core questions. And I'm going to tell you these right now. In every recurring conflict is asking one of these four questions. Number one, am I safe with you? Am I safe with you? Number two, do I matter to you? Number three, can I be myself with you? Or do I have to be pretending to be someone else? Number four, are we equals in this relationship? These are the four fundamental questions that every conflict is about. Let me repeat them because it is important that you really get this. Number one, am I safe with you? Number two, do I matter to you? Number three, can I be myself with you? Number four, are we equals in this relationship? These are attachment questions, my friends. Attachment questions. They are power questions. They are identity questions. They are about structure of the relational system itself. And here's the systems thinking piece that I want to share with you. These questions don't live inside one person. It's not inside me or you alone. They emerge from the interaction between us. They emerge in the space of the interaction between two people, two individuals, their system level concerns. It doesn't live in each one of us individually. So when you fight about the plates in the sink, you might actually be asking, do you respect my needs as much as yours? That's the fundamental question that you're asking. Disguised in the form of an argument that is about the dishes in the sink. right? So this is about power and equality. So when you fight about being late, for example, often, right, it happens every now and then. Oh, you're late again. We are supposed to leave half an hour ago, and here you are again late. Blah blah blah. These arguments happen every now and then. So when you fight about being late, you might be asking, the fundamental question is, am I important enough for you to prioritize? Am I important enough for you to prioritize? In other words, it's about mattering and safety, which is disguised as an argument about time. So when you fight about how much time they spend with friends, you might be asking, are we close enough? Am I enough for you? Right? And that's about detachment and connection, disguised in the form of an argument about how much time your partner might be spending with his or her friends. The content is just proxy. That's what I'm getting to. All of the surface issues that you're fighting about, these issues are just proxy. The real conversation is happening under the hood, underneath. Open the bonnet, and then you'll see the working. And until you address what's actually being asked, the content will keep coming, keep changing, but the pattern will remain the same. You can fight about infinitely new things. Pattern remains pretty much unchanged. And so you won't be happy. You won't have joy in your relationship. And that's something that we need to obviously work on. Let's break down what's happening psychologically when we when we fight, when we actually fight. First, let's talk about content versus process. Content is what you are fighting about, right? The dishes in the kitchen, the schedule, the comment somebody made, the time issue, etc., etc. Process is how you're fighting. Your tone, your defensiveness, whether you listen or whether you interrupt, you're aggressive, whether you attack, withdraw, all of these are the hows, right? The process. But beneath both content and process is something even deeper, the unmet need, the unmet, unspoken need, or the existential questions the conflict is really about. So, there is this very famous researcher called Sue Johnson who developed emotionally focused therapy. And she talks about this brilliantly. She says that most relationship conflicts are not about the presenting issue, they are about attachment. Our primal need, our basic fundamental human need to feel safe, to be seen, to be significant in our closest relationships. When that need feels threatened, our nervous system responds as if we are in danger. And that's when fights escalate beyond logic. That's how it actually happens. Secondly, So that was content versus process. Second, the nervous system hijack. This is important to understand. I've spent enormous amount of time talking about this thing to so many people. Here's what happens physiologically, biologically, when we perceive relational threat. Your amygdala, basically the bottom part of your brain, the brain's threat detect, it's your alarm system, your threat detection system center. Your amygdala activates. Your sympathetic nervous system floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline. Blood flow shifts away from your prefrontal cortex, which is your front area of your brain responsible for, logical, rational thinking. Blood flow moves from there towards your limbic system around here, where emotion and survival instincts are taken care of. Right? So, when we perceive a relational threat, amygdala fires, cortisol, adrenaline floods, blood moves from prefrontal cortex to the limbic system. This is what is happening, and this is literally called flooding. Flooding. And once you're flooded, you literally cannot access the parts of your brain responsible for perspective taking, nuance, compromise. Not possible. It's physiologically, biologically not possible. Blood has moved from those areas. So that part of your brain has shut off practically. And it's your limbic system, emotion, survive, run, fight, flee. This is what is happening. You're in fight or flight mode at that moment. And in that state, let me say this again. In that state, everything feels like life or death. Everything feels like an existential problem. The dishes in your kitchen, the plates unwashed in your sink, they literally become a referendum on your self worth. Being late becomes evidence that you are unloved in this world. This is why, my friends, trying to talk rationally or trying to knock sense logically during a heated conflict or heated fight, it rarely works. It doesn't work. You're asking someone whose nervous system is in survival mode to think clearly. How? How is that supposed to happen? It doesn't happen. It's neurologically not possible. So the next time, please, I interject this episode script and I'm begging you, the next time you're in a heated conflict with your husband, your wife, your friend, your colleague, your cousin, your brother, sister, whoever, remember that it's likely that both of you are in fight or flight mode. And knocking sense into each other, talking rationally, is unlikely to work. Or if at least one other person is in an agitated state of mind, and if he or she is in fight or flight mode, trying to talk rationally is not going to work. And at that point, please refrain from being judgmental by saying things such as, oh, you don't understand what I am saying, you don't understand me. you're simply escalating the conflict even further. So that is the second thing, the nervous system hijack. Third thing is the four questions, the four core questions beneath every fight that I mentioned before. I'll just get into it a bit more in depth. Let me walk you through the four deeper questions one by one. Question number one: am I safe with you? This is the fundamental attachment question, attachment security question. It's asking, can I trust you? Will you hurt me? If I'm vulnerable with you, will you ever use it against me? Arguments that seem to be about bringing up the past, or arguments about holding grudges, are often about this question. The person is not trying to punish you for past mistakes. That is not what is coming up. They are trying to assess whether the relationship is safe enough to trust again. They're not trying to push your buttons again and again and again. Question number two: do I matter to you? This is the significance question. It's asking, am I important enough for you? Important enough for you to prioritize? Do you think my needs count as much as yours? So, arguments about time, lateness, missed plans, or lack of attention are usually about this question. It's not really about that 15-20 minutes of delay, right? Because the world doesn't really come to an end. It's about whether being on time or keeping promises or say responding to your WhatsApp messages, whether these things are actually signaling that the person matters. That's what is happening here. Question number three: can I be myself with you? This is the identity question. It's asking, do I have to be someone else to keep your love and your attention? Can I express my actual thoughts and feelings? Or do I have to keep editing myself in front of you constantly? Arguments about, oh, you're too sensitive, or why do you have to make everything a big deal? Arguments of this kind are often about this question. One person is asking to be accepted as they are, and the other person is asking them to change to maintain the relationship's stability. Question number four: are we equals in the relationship? This is the power question, right? Whose needs? It's basically asking whose needs matter more, mine or yours, in this relationship? Who gets to make decisions? Who defers to whom here in this relationship? Arguments about, say, money, household chores, parenting decisions are usually about this question. The surface content is the vehicle, but the deeper question is really fundamentally about power distribution in the relational system, right? So that was about the four core questions. That was the third point. that we are talking about, the different psychological things that are happening. The first was content versus process. Second was the nervous system hijack. Third is these four questions. And now, fourth is the paradox of fighting. The paradox of fighting. Here's something that sounds contradictory, but it is psychologically true. Sometimes fighting is an attempt, is a way to create connection. Doesn't that sound paradoxical? Doesn't that sound weird? How does fighting lead? What fighting, connection? Aren't they the opposite things? Yeah, they sound like and look like the opposite things on surface. But sometimes conflict is a way to create connection. Let me explain. When someone picks a fight, they might actually be saying, I need to know you're still here. I'm picking a fight because I need to know you're still here. I need to feel like I matter. I matter enough for you to engage with me, even if that engagement is a fight. Right? That's a way of connecting. So, this is especially true for people with anxious attachment problems. For them, even negative attention can feel better than no attention at all. So conflict at least confirms that the other person cares enough to respond with a fight at least, right? So fighting is a way of responding and connecting. This is why some relationships cycle between intense fights and intense reconnection. Fights and reconnection. The fight creates distance, which creates the need for closeness, which leads to reconnection. But the underlying system hasn't changed. So the cycle repeats. So now let's zoom out. Having looked at the psychological issues, um, let's zoom out and see this from a systems perspective. Conflicts don't happen in a vacuum. They don't happen in a vacuum. They emerge from the structure of the relational system itself. By that, what I mean is this. In most conflicts, both people can point to the other person as the one who started it. Haven't you had this experience before? In every fight, it's easy for you to say, he started it, she started it, they started it, someone started it. You say, I withdrew because you criticized me. They say, I criticized because you withdrew. Finger pointing. So who's right? When you say that, who is right? Well, both of you and neither of you. I'll explain. What you're describing is circular causality. I touched upon this in our very first episode of season 3. Your withdrawal and their criticism are part of the same feedback loop. Each behavior triggers the other. There is no starting point. The pattern maintains itself. It's self-reinforcing. This is one of the core insights of systems thinking. In ongoing relationships, and I really want you to listen to this carefully, in ongoing relationships, asking who started it is the wrong question. It is the wrong question to ask. The right question to ask is, what maintains this pattern? What is maintaining this pattern? That is the question to ask, not who started the fight. So let's say you have an unmet need to feel prioritized. You have a need, nothing wrong with that need. You have an unmet need to feel prioritized. You express this need by criticizing your partner for being late. Partner spends time with everyone, other people, doing other things, not prioritizing you. So you have this unmet need and you criticize. Your partner hears criticism as an attack. He or she is listening to this, hearing this as, and takes it and interprets this as an attack. Their nervous system goes into defense mode. They respond with defensiveness or counterattack. Okay? Their defensiveness confirms your fear that you don't matter. Basically, they've just confirmed it because they've just responded in a way that confirms your worst nightmare, that they don't care about you. So you escalate. So you criticize more hurt. They escalate in response. More defensiveness, more withdrawal. This is a self-reinforcing feedback loop, right? Prime example. Each response amplifies the next, the pattern intensifies. And here's the crucial part that I need you to understand. Both people are responding to the real stimuli. You're not making up the defensiveness. They are not making up the criticism either. But the system has created a dynamic where both of you are stuck. You both are stuck in roles that maintain that cycle unknowingly. Even when a pattern is rather painful and ridiculous and dysfunctional, relationship systems tend to maintain their current state. That's the amazing thing. This phenomenon is called homeostasis. Homeostasis. Why does this happen? Because familiarity feels safer. Familiarity is safer than unfamiliarity or uncertainty, even when familiarity is dysfunctional. You are familiar with dysfunctional system. Everything bad is happening, but at least it's familiar to you. That is better than uncertainty. And therefore, patterns do not change. Homeostasis, balance, stable. If you've always fought about whose career comes first, common fight, right? Between husbands and wives, between partners, trying to address the underlying power imbalance might just feel too destabilizing. And therefore, the fight is familiar. Changing the structure is not familiar. So, keep fighting. I know this sounds irrational, but that's what is going on. So, the system resists change. One person tries to shift the pattern, and the other, often unconsciously, escalates or withdraws in ways that pull them back into the familiar dynamic again. This is why individual therapy, alone sometimes doesn't change relationship patterns. Working with one person is not enough. You doing therapy alone by yourself might not be enough. You can become more self aware, more emotionally regulated, more skilled at communication. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if the system doesn't shift, then you'll keep getting pulled back into the old dance. Remember, it takes two to tango, right? So you get pulled into the old dance again and again and again. So here's the powerful reframe that I want you to think about. What if the recurring conflict is not a problem to solve? All the recurring conflicts in your life is not a problem for you to solve, but information about what the system needs. Let me repeat that. What if the recurring conflict is not a problem to solve, but is in fact information about what the system actually needs? If you keep fighting about closeness and distance, maybe the system is asking, how do we create a structure that honors both people's need for autonomy and connection? If you keep fighting about power, maybe the system is asking, how do we redistribute decision making so that both of us feel agency? If you keep fighting about safety, maybe the system is asking, what repair work needs to happen so that trust can be rebuilt? The conflict is basically, my friends, what I'm trying to say is the conflict is a symptom. The conflict is a symptom. The unmet system need, the unmet system need is the root that you need to look for. The conflict is merely a symptom. Let me make this concrete, like I did last time. Romantic relationship. Let's talk about an intimacy battle. Okay? Let's talk seriously. Maya and Alex, two individuals, they fight about sex all the time. Alex wants more frequency. Maya wants more, what do you say, emotional connection first. But, oh, who's right, who's wrong? But remember, that's not the right question, right? The real question underneath is, can we be close without one of us disappearing? Can we be close without one of us disappearing time and again? Alex pursues sex as a way of feeling connected. That's his way. Maya, on the other hand, withdraws because she doesn't feel emotionally safe first. The pursuer distancer dynamic plays out in the bedroom, but it's really about attachment, not desire. So while this is a conflict that is playing out in the bedroom and it is seemingly about sex and physical experience and desire, it's really about attachment. The content is sex. The surface content is sex. The pattern, however, is about closeness and distance. The deeper question is about safety and connection in the system. That is what is really at play, not desire or lack thereof. That's one example. Let's take another one. Co-parenting, you know, the respect fight happens all the time. Two individuals, Jamal and his ex-wife, Simone, they fight about parenting decisions. She wants structure and rules while he wants fun and flexibility. But the real question underneath is, are we actually equals in this co parenting system? Simone feels like Jamal undermines her authority when he's always lenient with the kids. And Jamal just kind of feels like Simone controls everything. She's a control freak. Both are fighting about power, disguised as a fight about parenting philosophy. This is not about parenting philosophy. This is about power. This is about control. Who is in control? That's what the underlying question really is about. Workplace. Let's take another example, right? Jen and David I introduced in our first episode. Jen and her manager David fight about project timelines. Jen says she needs more time. David says deadlines are non negotiable. But the real question here is not about deadlines, really. Is, do I matter in the system? Do I have any say in the system? Jen always feels unheard and undervalued. David feels like Chen doesn't respect any kind of organizational constraints. They're fighting about significance, whether Chen's needs are taken seriously or not. The content, however, is the timelines that are set by organization or by David, the manager. The process is tension around deadlines, but the pattern really is about mattering and respect ultimately. So, those were some really simple examples to drive home the point. Let's look at some practical application. So, how do you actually use this information to shift your conflicts? That's the key question here. So, allow me to share a few steps with you. One, pause and ask, what is this really about? Next time you're in a recurring conflict or a fight, pause mid argument or after and ask yourself, if this isn't really about the plates and the dishes or about the time and the money and the sex or whatever, what is it about? What is it really about? Listen for the deeper question. Remember the four questions. Am I safe with you? Do I matter to you? Can I be myself with you? Are we equals here? You don't need to be 100% certain. Just notice what is arising. So that's step one. Step two is name the pattern, not the person. Okay? So instead of saying, you always criticize me, or something of that sort, something of that nature, you always blame me, you always point your finger at me, blah, blah, blah. Try saying something like this: I notice we have this pattern where I feel criticized, then I shut down, then you feel dismissed, and then we escalate. So, when you say that, you are naming the pattern. You have identified the pattern. You have brought the pattern to yours and your partner's awareness, to the other person's awareness, right? And this shifts from blame to observation. And that's very critical. You're naming the systemic dynamic, you're the system dynamic, the systemic issue, not attacking the other person, which, if you do, continues the conflict. Step number three, share the deeper need. Once you've identified what you're really asking for, share it in a vulnerable way, vulnerably. Instead of you're always late, which is a criticism, try something like this. When you're late, I feel like I don't matter to you much. So I need reassurance that I am a priority in your life. Just say that. And that is saying what you want to say, what you really need. And that's being vulnerable. And I agree that it is scary for many of us to be vulnerable in front of even our closest, nearest loved ones. But and I also agree that it's much easier to criticize someone than to be vulnerable in front of. But please remember that vulnerability is the leverage point that shifts the system. Vulnerability is the leverage point that shifts the system. Why? Because it interrupts, it breaks the defensive cycle, which is very, very important for us. It's hard to defend, right? It's hard to defend against someone's pain, right? So if you're not, you're going on a defensive, or if you're going to be aggressive, it's difficult to do that when you're faced with someone's genuine pain or need. It invites, when you're being vulnerable, it invites curiosity instead of combat. Simple as. Step 4, address the system need. Address the system need, not just the content. So if the recurring fight is about power, the solution is not to compromise on every individual decision. It's to restructure how decisions get made in the first place so that both people have genuine agency in the process. If the recurring fight is about safety, the solution isn't to promise you'll never hurt each other ever again. That's unrealistic. It's to create repair rituals, ways of coming back together after momentary ruptures, which happens. If the recurring fight is about mattering, the solution is not some grand gesture, buying flowers or, or fancy dinners or expensive holidays. It's consistent, small signals that show that the person is actually prioritized. Simple. Think systemically. Ask yourself, what structure would meet this need in an ongoing way, in a sustainable way going forward, and not just resolve this instance, this issue right now? Think about it from a systems point of view. Step number 5, notice your nervous system and its state. Before trying to have a productive conversation about the deeper issue, check in with your nervous system. Are you flooded? Heart racing, thoughts, spiraling, bodies tense? If yes, remember you're in fight or flight. You need to regulate first, regulate your body first and your nervous system first before you can think clearly. Take a break, go for a walk, breathe. Return when your nervous system has settled down. This is not avoidance, it's a physiological necessity. You need to understand and respect it. You can't access the thinking brain whilst your survival brain is switched on and activated. Simple as that. You need to understand this physiology and act accordingly. Step 6, experiment with shifting the pattern. If you're the person who usually pursues, try pulling back a little bit, slightly. Not stonewalling, but creating space instead of always, pushing for solutions or resolutions or blaming, etc. If you're the person who usually withdraws, try staying present 10% longer before you withdraw. Not forcing engagement, but interrupting the automatic shutdown that you normally have. Small shifts in the feedback loop can change the entire dynamic. That's what I'm getting to. Step 7, get external support if needed. Sometimes patterns are just so deeply entrenched. I sympathize, I empathize with that. It's so deeply entrenched that you need help seeing them in the first place. A therapist, a counselor, or a coach with a systems orientation can help you identify, name, recognize the feedback loops that you can't see from within the system. You're inside it. So it's very much possible that you can't see it clearly. Get help if you need to. This is, please, do not consider this as failure. It's recognizing that some patterns need outside perspective to shift. And there's nothing to be shameful about. So, coming to an end of this second episode, here's what I really want you to take away and want you to remember. And I was almost begging at the beginning of this episode for your attention. So here's what I want you to remember. The content of your fights, the plates and the dishes, the time problems, the schedule, the comments, the messages, the money, the sex, whatever, is rarely what the conflict is actually about. Remember that. Beneath the content is a deeper question about safety, significance, identity, power, etc. And beneath that question is a relational system with its own patterns, feedback loops, and resistance to change. When you fight about the same things again and again and again, repeatedly, you're not dealing with multiple problems, really speaking. You're dealing with one pattern expressing itself in different forms and colors. That's all it really is. But it is still complex. The good news is that once you see the pattern, you can actually do something about it. You can intervene. You can break loops, not by solving the surface problem, but by addressing the system beneath it, the system need beneath it. This is what expands your capacity for healthier conflict, as I said in the last episode. It's about expanding your capability to have healthier conflicts, shifting from how do we resolve this issue, how do we resolve this specific issue, to what is the pattern? What is the pattern to tell us, or what is the pattern trying to tell us about our relationship system needs? That's what you move. You move from how do we resolve this issue right now to asking the question, what is this pattern trying to tell us about our relationship system need? In the next episode, we're exploring what actually happens when two people have fundamentally different approaches to conflict itself. When one person fights too much and the other fights too little, the avoider seeker dynamic. And why just, meet in the middle strategy doesn't actually work, rarely works. So, if this episode helped you see at least a little bit beneath the surface of your own conflicts, let me know in the comments. What are you really fighting about? What's under the hood? Let me know in the comments below. So, thanks very much for watching with your time, patience, and attention. I know these episodes are turning out to be much longer than the ones that you are used to, but the subject matter demands a longer expression and talking in length about these matters. So I thank you for your time and attention. Thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, keep flourishing. Ciao for now.